Welcome to Candid Conversation. I was watching a series on the Heaven's Gate cult from 1997, and they gave a definition of a cult in that. In fact, the name of the series was Heaven's Gate, a cult of cults, and the leader actually called themselves that, a cult of cults. And thinking about that term, they gave a definition of a cult. I wrote it down. They said a cult is where someone programs and influences you in a systematic way. In other words, the idea is that you don't think for yourself anymore. You're brainwashed. That's another term people use. Is that instead of looking at things logically and look at the facts, that you just believe whatever they tell you. So here's a group that for 22 years was brainwashed to believe that they were going to go to the next level through a spaceship, and they ended up committing suicide to get there after 22 years. And so people look at them and say, oh, they're brainwashed, they're a cult. Yeah, but when you think of that term, the cult is where you're programmed and influenced in a systematic way. Really, what do you look at society? You look at today, and society as a whole is a cult. They're brainwashed. A lot of times we don't think of that. We think of a cult or someone brainwashed as someone who, the definition that they gave is programmed and influenced in a systematic way so that you don't think logically. But the way people look at that is it's a fringe group. It's a small thing. Well, in reality, what you've got in this world is people are programmed and influenced in a systematic way, and they don't think logically. And that's what's in our society. If you go back 100 years or so in America, the Christian religion was what was taught. Everybody believed there was a God. The God of the Bible was that God, that he should be worshipped. Now, they had different interpretations of how that's done, but they all followed God. And the thing is that man is a sinner. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And God gave all of us a conscience to know right from wrong. And the purpose of that, according to Romans 7, Galatians 3:24, the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. But after that faith has come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster, Galatians 3:24. The purpose of the law is not that you will obey the law, but it's so that you recognize that you can't obey the law. And from Romans 1, all of us know, we have the internal witness that there is a God who's created us, that we should worship him. Romans 1:32, everybody knows that due to our sin, we are worthy of death. And so we know, due to our conscience, that we are sinners. We know that God will give us the punishment of death for our sin. And so then we need to turn to God, his eternal power and Godhead, to find the answer so that we can have eternal life. And that's where today, if you do that, Hebrews 11:6 says that God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So when you diligently seek the Lord, recognizing that you're a sinner and diligently seek the Lord for the solution to that, then he will make sure you find the gospel to trust in Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as atonement for your sin. So you believe that gospel, now you've got the gift of eternal life. That's the whole purpose of that. So the logical way of thinking. If you want to look at things from logically speaking, you'll say, I know right from wrong, but I don't always do the right. I also do the wrong. And I know, logically speaking, that I am worthy of death for that. God's judgment is that I'm worthy of death. I know there is a creator. The invisible things of him are clearly seen by those which are made. Even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Romans 1:19 and 20. So we know that we are sinners. We know that we're worthy of death from God, God's judgment as a result of our sin. We know that God created us. We know that God has the eternal power and Godhead to save us. So then we diligently search God for God, and then God rewards us by giving us the gospel of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as atonement for our sin. We recognize that gospel, we believe it, and we're saved. That's God's design. That's how, if you want to think logically, that's what you do. But the problem is that this world, they don't want to think logically. So, 100 years ago, maybe that's what you got here in America. You've got, maybe you don't have a clear gospel being taught by churches, or maybe they've got religious things that they have you do that God wouldn't want you to do. But for the most part, at least, the society is in a God construct. It's in a setting where we recognize that we're sinners and that we turn to God for the answer. And now maybe we end up turning to a church, but at least in our minds we're thinking we're turning to God. But now we're in a society that is a cult. The whole society is a cult. They're brainwashed. What is a cult? It is a programmed and influenced in a systematic way. So now I'm not going to think logically that I know right from wrong, and I don't always do the right, therefore I'm a sinner worthy of death, and that God has the power to save me, so I go to God for the answer. That's all brain work there. That's all me thinking, using my brain that God gave me to look for the solution. But what society is doing today is they don't think there is a God. So now most people don't go to church. They're not. If they do, they don't believe in God or the Bible. Churches have watered down their messages. People have itching ears. They've turned to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. They've turned their ears away from the truth, turned themselves into fables. So even in a church setting, you don't have God and the gospel and God's word being taught. And so now our society has been programmed and influenced in a systematic way, where now we are not going to think rationally. I mean, first off, think of the logical things I mentioned. Well, we know that God, we know of His eternal power and Godhead. We know that He created us. Okay, that's, everybody knows that. God has shown it unto them. That's what Romans 1:19 and 20 says. And God cannot lie. So if God says that, then that means everybody knows there's a God, that He created us, and we should worship Him. And instead, our society, for the most part, believes in a Big Bang Theory. They believe in evolution. They don't believe that God created them. So what is evolution? Evolution is part of a cult. They're programmed and influenced in a systematic way to think that there is no God, that there is just all these random elements floating in space all around here. And then poof, they all came together, exploded, and then all this order was created. That's not a logical thinking. You've got to be programmed and influenced in a systematic way to think that. Because logic tells you that's not how it works. I've never experienced that in my everyday life. Tell you, if I take a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and throw it down the stairs, it's not going to be put together when it gets to the bottom of the stairs. And the human body is a whole lot more complicated than a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And that's just the human body. Then you think of everything, the weather, the planets. If the Earth was any closer to the sun, we'd burn up. If we're any farther away, we'd freeze to death. And the planets are positioned perfectly, and they move perfectly. And the weather, the cycles and all that. I mean, everything. And we're just talking about nature. They talk about God making animals and just all that stuff. And I can't even get a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle to come together. I mean, if I told you I threw down, I took a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, it was completely out of order, and I just threw it down the stairs as hard as I could, and it came together. I mean, you would think I was crazy. And I swore up and down that's what happened. Well, that's exactly what happened. You'd say, well, no, that would never happen. You couldn't even get two pieces to come together, much less 1,000. Oh, no, that's what happened. And if I did that, you'd think I was bonkers, I was crazy. I'd be lying. That didn't happen. But yet somehow we're going to believe in something a whole lot more complicated than a jigsaw puzzle. And that's where we're living. And we're going to believe that's true. The clothes. I washed a load of clothes. Put them in the dryer. Not once have I ever taken those clothes out of the dryer and they're neatly folded and the shirts are all together and the socks are all together and the underwear is all together. The pants are all together. They're all mixed up. They're all, bundled up. I got to unravel them all. We see in our society that things go logically from order to disorder. That's why you have jobs. If the Big Bang Theory is true, why do we have engineers? Why do we have inventors? You don't need that stuff. All you have to do is just take a bunch of random particles and items and materials and just throw them up in the air and poof, they'll all bang together and come up with something new. That's how you would invent something. You don't need to know laws of engineering and physics and geometry and all this stuff. You don't need any of that. You just take a bunch of materials and throw them all together and poof, out comes something new. But yet, all of society knows that's not true, and yet they all say that there is no God, that things evolved over hundreds of millions of billions of years, and it was just random chance. I mean, that is the most illogical theory you've ever heard of. And so they're programmed and influenced in a systematic way. And then you just see that continuing in our society. So they don't recognize a creator. The creator, what did he do? He created male and female so that the male would keep the female's sins in check and the female would keep the male's sins in check, and we wouldn't destroy ourselves. And what does they say today? Well, gender identity is, who are you to say that I'm a man? Maybe today I feel like I'm a woman today, and I'm really a woman, so I need to get all my body parts changed to be a woman. And, maybe 10 years down the road, I'll feel like I'm a man, and you can change them all back. And then 10 years later, I'll be a woman again. I'll just keep going back and forth. I just change genders like it changes a coat, That's utterly ridiculous to think I'm a different gender. I mean, certainly there are these extreme rare cases where people are born and they've got differences, but that's not different genders. It's birth defects is what that's called. But those are extremely rare how that stuff happens. I mean, in general, you've got people who are born and it's obvious. The baby is born. The doctor, all he has to do is look at the baby for 5 seconds, and he automatically says, it's a boy, or it's a girl. He doesn't say, well, let's see here, I don't know, it's hard to tell on this one. I'm going to have to, all he does is see what body parts they have, and he's got it figured out instantly. He'd never seen the baby before, it's just born, and it's a small human. It's not like you wait till they're an adult to see what they're going to be. I mean, they just pop out of the womb, and within 3 or 4 seconds, if it's a boy or girl, instantly. And you don't even have to be a doctor to figure that out. Just old Joe Blow down the street can figure that out. You don't have to have a PhD. So, and yet, we're told that, you can't really call that person a he or she. You got to find out what their preferred personal pronouns are. That's utterly ridiculous. We know what they are. God made them. You can just tell by looking at them and see. I don't even have to, once they're a kid, I don't have to see the body parts. They can be clothed. And I can tell. Now, maybe as a young child, maybe it's a little harder, but get to be an adult, I can tell if it's a woman or a man. You can look at how their facial features are. You can look at how their body type is. Everything is shaped. And they're fully clothed, and I can still tell it's a boy or a girl. Even if they try to hide themselves, which they do nowadays, not wearing things that are pertaining to their gender that you would expect, you can still tell. Look at somebody and say, boy, that person's dressed like a boy, but that's really a girl. You can tell. And yet our society wants us to believe that people can choose their own genders. And just, a lot of examples. But what it is that our society is following a cult. That cult is called secular humanism, where we've taken God out of the mix. We say there is no God, so we replace it with the Big Bang. That's being programmed in a systematic way. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then we think that we're going to be okay because we can decide for ourselves what we do. God isn't going to punish us because there is no God, and we're okay as long as we're good, outstanding citizens. You can do whatever you want to do as long as you don't harm anybody else. Well, that also is being programmed in a systematic way because we know we have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and that we are worthy of God's judgment, which is death, as a result of our sin. So we've taken God out of the mix. We've taken sin out of the mix. Again, that's programmed in a systematic way to think that there is no God and to think that there is no sin. That I can decide what I want to do, as long as I don't harm anybody else. So what that does is it gives birth to all this virtual reality stuff. All the sins that you want to do. Well, I can't physically kill somebody because that would hurt them. But I could play a violent video game and kill people that way. So in virtual reality, I can kill. And it doesn't harm anybody. That's not what God says. God says sin is the issue of the heart. And you know that, logically speaking. Because if you're talking about a cult being programmed in a systematic way, then it means you're going to override what your brain says and you're going to go by some theory. See, the idea that there is no God, that the Big Bang happened, that I'm a boy or girl based upon what I say I am rather than what the body parts say I am. The idea that there is no sin, that as long as I don't hurt anybody, I'm okay. So they redefine that. And even if I do sin, well, there is no hell. There's no punishment for that. All of that stuff goes against logic. It goes against the brain that God gave us and the evidence of the Creator and His eternal power and Godhead. It goes against it. So secular humanism replaces all the logical stuff that we have built into our brain that God gave us. It replaces all of the evidence that we have. I don't have to be a smart person to figure out that a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle thrown down the flight of stairs is not going to magically come together at the bottom. Or that my socks coming out of the dryer are all going to be by themselves and they're all going to be neatly color coordinated and everything. The pairs are going to be aligned together. The shirts are going to be folded. They're all together. The pants are going to be together. The underwear is all going to be together. I don't need to be a smart person to figure that out. God's given me a brain, and I've seen by my experience that the world goes, the second law of thermodynamics says that things go from order to disorder. And that's why I get to go work for a living, because I get to try to put things in order, spend 8 hours a day putting things in order, and I'm paid for that. But yet, all these people who know how the world works says, well, initially, just all these chemicals just floating out there in outer space, just all came together, poof, here's a human. Or maybe it wasn't a human at first, maybe it formed as a fish, and then the fish eventually gets on land, and the land becomes an animal. Then the ape eventually becomes a human. And, well, that's even crazier than the chemical theory. Because, again, I haven't seen any of that happen. Well, it happens over billions of years, so you wouldn't see any changes. And exactly how does that happen? A fish, you can't have half an ape walking around. Let's say the fish goes to land and he becomes an ape. Well, if it's going to take billions of years to make all these changes, then you're going to go through many, 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 many lives of fishes and apes that are half-breeds, because, it takes all that time to make those changes. But yet that doesn't work. Once the fish is out of water, the fish can't just wait billions of years for lungs to form. I've got gills to breathe, but now I'm out of water. I need lungs. You can't have generations of fish on land and taking millions of years to develop lungs. It's just utterly ridiculous. It won't work. You got to have the whole mechanism together. You know, a land animal needs land parts, a water animal needs water parts, and you can't just have half water and half land, and spend half of your time where you have your bottom part of your body in the water and the top part on the land. I mean, how do you do it? And you go spend your whole life like that? It doesn't work. So all of these things about secular humanism, the woke culture, the gender identity, evolution, all these theories that are out there, and they're being widely accepted by our young people because those idiot professors in universities are teaching them, and they just go ahead and believe it. Well, why? Because they're being brainwashed is what it is. They're not thinking for themselves. And so what you have is, you know, we think of a cult as a fringe group. Oh, Heaven's Gate. Oh, they're so stupid. They think this alien ship is going to come and get them. Well, you know, that's a lot more rational than evolution and secular humanism, because at least with their theory, the Heaven's Gate, they at least think that there is life beyond this planet and that there is a higher being that's going to come and take them away. I mean, certainly it's not the God of the Bible, but it's a whole lot closer to the truth than a Big Bang and gender identity and, you know, the evolution type theories and all this crazy stuff at secular humanism, not recognizing a sin, all that. So, you know, we think, oh, the Heaven Gate people are stupid. The same people who are thinking they're stupid are the people who are even dumber than they are, because they won't even recognize they're a sinner. They won't even recognize there's a God, and they believe in some evolutionary theory that that is completely irrational because they're programmed in a systematic way. Therefore, secular humanism and society as a whole is following a cult. They're brainwashed. Thanks for watching.